Daily Faceoff prospect analyst Stephen Ellis, who dropped his latest top 75 draft rankings earlier on in the week. And since I asked the first question, I get to ask my favorite question, Stephen. Who's your biggest riser so far this year?
So this is the thing about this year's draft class is we've talked kind of a bunch about how it's probably not the deepest, it's probably not the most skilled, it's probably not the most exciting draft class. But the one thing where you look kind of across the board and you look at someone like Anton Fondell, who fell out of the top 10, moved back into the top 10. Ivan Ryabkin, who just basically fell off a cliff and came back. The one I'm looking at here is Riker Lee out of the USHL. And this is someone who very skilled, put up really good numbers in the USHL this year. 68 points in 58 games is pretty impressive. Now he played at the Shattuck St. Mary's program the last couple of years, was very good there. I wanted to see what he could do at the USHL. Tougher competition, stronger competition, and he looked really good. He also was a bit more physical than I thought he was going to be. He's not a huge forward, but he goes out there and he competes. You put that all together, there's a lot to like.
Okay, so you kind of touched on him briefly, but I got to ask about Anton Fondell because we've heard a lot of rumblings in recent days and weeks that this is a guy that has maybe even top 3 potential in the eyes of some of these teams. We've heard a ton about Misa and Hagens and Schaefer and everyone else, but what's the story with Anton Fondell?
Fondell is someone who's had to deal with so many injuries. You look at last year, he wasn't part of the U18 Swedish team when they desperately needed him. He wasn't part of the Helenka Gretzky team, same situation. He got injured again and the season started, and he started the fall. But he's also got the most productive season I think we've ever seen by a draft-eligible player in the second-tier Swedish league. But at the same time, we probably won't see him at the U18 World Championship again, and that's because his team is still playing. So he was named to their initial fuller big roster, but in terms of the U18 roster that got submitted yesterday, he's still not there. He hasn't been loaned out yet. But what you get from him is a guy who's very competitive, a great shot. He's excellent on the power play, and I think if you could just put everything together, he's a extremely talented prospect that could go as high as number 3. I wouldn't pick him as there because I still feel like his defensive game isn't as high as some of the other guys at this point. But you're still looking at someone here who, like, I have Caleb Denoyer at number 5. Fondell could be there. Jackson Smith could be there. Roger McQueen could be there. Like, everybody outside of that top 4 could easily be in that 5th spot. So there's a lot of good competition there. With Fondell, you're getting a guy who loves to shoot, and he could play center, he could play wing. You put that together, there's a lot to like.
Okay, so let me just drill down on exactly what you just said. So are you telling me that you think these top 4, as you see them, in maybe slightly different order, but these are the top 4 you think will end up going, or in that order, or what does it look like? Tell us what your board looks like.
Those are the
like mock draft is different than your rankings, right?
Yes. I still have those top 4 in my top 4. Again, it could really depend on how this draft lottery goes. Like Schaefer, I think, is number 1 if San Jose's picking. Misa's number 1 if Chicago's picking, type thing. Hagens, I know a lot of people have kind of soured on him. I feel like that's a mistake. This is a guy who still put up a point per game in the NCAA, playing all types of situations. That's very difficult to do. It's not Will Smith numbers. It's not Macklin Celebrini numbers or Adam Fantilli numbers, but it's still impressive. I like Porter Martone. He's probably the guy I've watched the most in this draft class. So competitive. But then again, I've said in the past, it's the top 4 that really stand out. I feel like 5th to 10th has really caught up to someone like Porter Martone. And it's because the gap is a lot closer. And I think that's because everyone brings something different to the table. Roger McQueen, and you talked about it last time I was on, Frank, about we can't really ignore him because he didn't play a ton this year. But I think in this case, the end of the season for him was a lot better than when he first returned from his injury. That's promising. He's got a high ceiling. Jake O'Brien's one of the smartest guys in this draft. Jackson Smith, I got a feature about him coming tomorrow. He's a future top pairing defenseman. Caleb Denoyer is a proven winner at all levels. Fondell is just a great shooter. It really just depends on what that team in 5th wants the most, I think, is how that order goes.
Any notable reentry players in this year's draft? I know that we're moving probably out of the first round with this question here and further down your draft board and your rankings, but anyone in that category?
It's kind of an interesting one here because this year there's not a ton of really great ones. I'm thinking Epperson out of Saginaw is a guy that you really got to look out there, and he's someone who played at the U.S. National Team Development Program, was kind of a a depth guy. He was actually sent down to the U17 team, but then really went out there and impressed this year in Saginaw. Just did so many great things. And you look at those numbers, 80 points for a guy that didn't look like a point producer at any level heading into this. And that also just really shows you how hard it could be being a depth guy on the NTDP team where there's all this great talent. He kind of got shuffled out. He ended up becoming a fourth liner and eventually fell down to the U17 team, which is a difficult situation when that happens, when you've been playing with these guys for 2 years and you kind of get demoted. Goes to Saginaw, makes the most of his opportunities, a great playmaker, really good in the power play. I could see him being a second-round pick here.
We got one in the YouTube chat. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Frank.
No, just a quick question. Like, okay, so you see this point total and it's obviously like 80 points. You're like, oh, that's really impressive. And then you see like there's been some really interesting like league conversions. Like you see someone like Jack Pridham go from out west joining the OHL and then becomes a point per game player. And you go like, how do you go from a supposed lesser junior league and then go to a major junior league and put up more points than you were elsewhere? I guess just an overall philosophical question. Should we be looking at point production and holding it in different regard than we typically would have maybe a few years ago?
See, a big point improvement is obviously one thing, but for me, and I know a lot of other scouts, it's not the points that are what's important. It's the translatable skills. And when you look at Epperson, it's the hockey sense, it's the playmaking. And that's what you see kind of with Jack Pridham, where you look at the numbers last year and you watched him play. It's like, oh, this guy's really good. He should be putting up better numbers. But it felt like a lot of the plays would die because he just didn't have the talent to play with. He goes to the OHL. He's surrounded by much better players. The point production looks great. And yeah, it definitely looks a bit wonky. But at the same time, it's the translatable skills were always there. This is a guy who could be a good skater. He's smart. And I always say, for me, if you're a smart prospect, you're going to make it work. You're going to find a role somewhere. A lot of the smartest players on any given team are those fourth line guys because they have to find different ways to be so skilled. Like Connor McDavid could probably turn his brain off for a week and still score a bunch of goals because he's Connor McDavid. He's got that pure talent. But the guys deep in our lineup have to work harder. So when you get that work ethic, you got the hockey IQ, the guys who can just read plays so well, you're going to be fine. And so, yeah, that's why you got to look past the stats, because you see so many of these guys who will go on these absolute heaters in the CHL and not do anything to the next level. Like Andrew Cristall is one that concerns me a bit because he's been so productive in the WHL. Is that going to translate to the NHL as a smaller player? It's a bit more difficult, but I feel like he's got the hockey sense that he should be able to make it work, he's not going to be a top line player in the NHL. So yeah, you got to look past the points. You got to be able to see what else you bring to the table. But that's why I like Epperson, because to me, he's just extremely smart. He always seems to be one play ahead of everybody. And that's why those numbers were as good as they were.
Okay, quick one from the YouTube chat. Pat, if we could flash up the top 10 again. Tommy dropped in. How many of these players in your top 5, top 10 do you view as being potentially ready to jump into an NHL lineup next season?
I would pick 0. I wouldn't be surprised if not one player is in the NHL. And it's not a knock against the class. It's like Schaefer's missed most of the year. Misa, I think, has a chance, but man, that's a guy I would love to go see play in the NCAA next year, just to go see him really bulk up and see what he could do there, things like that. But like, if I had to take a guess, Misa is probably the best option to go to the NHL, but I'm always on the board of let the guys develop. Don't rush them.
All right.
Yeah.
Last one for you. Just because the U18
answer is
0. Yeah. The U18s begin in less than an hour. Really quickly, a player to watch and who's your pick to win?
William Moore on USA. I think he's, again, really smart player, not flashy, not great numbers, but he's just every level I've watched him play dating back to his U14 days. That's a guy who outthinks everybody out there. But Canada looks like the team to beat. We could see them get Cole Reshny, Keaton Verhoff, and Landon Dupont, the top prospect for 2027. We'll see what happens there. But I'm looking at Canada, especially in a year where the Americans just don't look as good. Canada seems to be the team to beat.
Landon Dupont, another high-end prospect that looks to be coming out of the WHL. Steven, appreciate your time, man. Thanks for doing this.
Thanks so much.
What's up, hockey fans? If you enjoyed that video, then you need to be hitting the subscribe button right here at Daily Faceoff. Exclusive interviews and analysis from our hockey insider Frank Saravalli, fantasy updates from Brock Sagan, and a daily live show at noon Eastern, Monday through Friday. You don't want to miss any of the fantastic content, so hit that subscribe button.